So, fellas, a few years ago in our little town, there's a bunch of guys at my CrossFit gym, mostly younger, probably mid 20s, 30s. And I sent them an email that said, meet, fire, whiskey, men. And then I gave them the address of our house, and um, 25 of them came over, which surprised me, which I sent out to 25. They all came. And I was asking them, like, have you guys ever had like a mentorship group that you could talk about life stuff with? And none of them had ever had like a group of guys to talk to. And I said, well, and I told them my story, and I said, I would love to facilitate kind of a time with you guys, maybe once a month. And I said, I'll do like a talk for you guys about something meaningful. And one of the guys said, well, like, what could we talk about? So, well, what do you guys want to talk about? And they were pretty quiet. I said, do you guys like ever think about living an honorable life? And I
Mm.
could tell they were like, I said, well, why don't we just talk about living an honorable life? We'll do like 4 or 5, 6 sessions. And it ended up being fantastic. I gave them a quote from a movie called Rob Roy, which was like a UK Irish movie. And there's a quote in there that says, honor is a gift a man gives himself. And I set it up kind of like this, is that not all men have the same opportunity financially with their careers. We don't know what's going to happen with our health, what that's going to do. And I went through the line. I said, so, I can't tell you what your life is going to end up like, but I think every man wants to be honorable. Like, I've never met a man that doesn't go, I would like to at least get through life and know that I did it well, or at least I did as good as I could. And I said, it's really the gift a man gives himself is at the end of every day, whether or not, the business went well, or, you got in a big fight with the wife, or teenage kids were raised, whatever it is. If you know that you lived honorably, you can generally go to sleep at night. But if you haven't, if you're cheating your way through, whatever. So we were just kind of talking about that. And I just found it, like it really kind of got me emotional that they wanted to live that way. They just didn't know how.
Yeah.
So I gave them kind of some concepts to set it up, in that honor throughout the centuries has always been like what we call a code of honor, or a chivalrous code. People that would work for the king and kingdom, they would all have codes. Our military actually has codes. So you can read, like the Marine Code. You can read the code of 7th century knights that are protecting the King of England. And they all have like these similarities. Um, so I wanted to just ask you guys, like, if we were to create a code for today based on your life, what would you, or like if you were passing down a code to your grandsons or your sons that they would pass down someday in your lifetime, what would be some things that you would go, to live an honorable life, you have to take this seriously? What would you say to that?
Mm. I think that, the word honor, or I know biblically the word honor means to consider to be of a great weight. So in the way,
Huh.
the reason that makes sense is because it would be like, like we say, or we used to say things like this, like, we would say, boy, that carries some weight with you, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Which means, oh, this means,
Yeah.
oh, this, and literally, um, the word despise, like in the Old Testament, it says, whosoever despises his father or mother, his lamp will go out in pitch darkness. God's light will go out. I mean, that's heavy,
Yeah. That's heavy right there.
right? So the word despise actually is the antonym to honor, surprisingly,
Really?
because despise means to consider to have no weight. And that's why we would say,
Huh.
you take him lightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, his word doesn't mean anything to me. I take
Interesting.
him lightly. So that's the opposite of honor. So to dishonor your parents really means to take them lightly, or dishonor anybody. So I think when we honor, it's not just something that we're we're wanting to earn, but if I want to honor my responsibility as a father, then I'm going to take that heavy or responsibility as a husband, where I'm just going to honor my wife. Then I am definitely considering her to have a great weight in my life, and this responsibility to be a great weight. So it means that we should put a lot of thought into it. And I think that way too many guys have a tendency just not to consider how much of a
Just
heavy responsibility
make too much light of
they
everything.
make light of everything. They just think, oh, well, I'm a husband.
Okay, so
I did
just
my
for you,
best.
and what would you say would be top one or two things you go to a young man, put some heavy weight on this? Like,
Yeah.
what would you?
Yeah. Well, I think definitely put heavy weight on the consideration of whether you're going to become a father or not,
Hmm.
because I mean, it's that old adage, uh, it doesn't take long to become a father. It takes a long time to become a dad. It takes a lot more. I mean, anybody can sire, can sow that seed that reproduces. So, the first thing I would say to young men is that responsibility.
If you've made offspring, like,
Yeah, you're making, I mean,
make it,
you are creating a being that's going to live 70, 80, 90, 100 years and is going to have to take on this world. He's going to have to deal with everything you've had to deal with, but in a different era. That's a pretty big responsibility that you're actually throwing on to this individual that's going to have to live that life. I don't think many people think of it that way.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think if you have, you meet dads that may not have been able to make a lot of money, but if their kids go, he's a great dad, you immediately go, oh, he's an honorable man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm just thinking, it's interesting. I think the word honorable is a little unused in the culture
Definitely.
that we're in.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of have to define what's honorable, and so what is honorable? Because if I said that to a lot of the guys that I mentor, they would have a vague idea around what honorable meant. But, when you put wheels on it and you start saying, okay, here's some words that are not used very often anymore either, like loyalty, faithfulness, integrity,
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things are really the heart of honor, right?
Yeah.
So you have,
Say those again.
loyalty,
Yeah.
faithfulness, integrity. Those are the things that, when I think about a code, that's how I want to see my life play out. I want to see my life play out with loyalty, faithfulness, and integrity. And so that word integrity is so encompassing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's having integrity in every aspect of your life, whether you're a father or you're an employer, an employee. It doesn't have to be a great act necessarily. What's honorable is when you go to work for a man and he's paying you by the hour, that during that hour that you're focused on that man's business.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's honorable, right?
Yeah.
And that's just
I like the way you said that.
Yeah. That's
well,
really good.
Yeah.
I think the integrity thing is really, it's funny hearing you say that and the way you framed that, Jeff, was you don't hear those words
No.
much. It's like those words are starting to be kind of antique, which is kind of crazy because those are some important words.
It's what things used to be based on.
Everything, right?
We say the greatest generation was that generation and if you were to line up, I mean, because that was essentially, that was your team.
Yeah.
So you go, but that was the mantra for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody went, well, that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah.
Today we wouldn't.
No.
The young men would go, well, explain loyalty. What does loyalty, like, do I not take the job, the better job offer? Do I not move constantly? Right. Yeah, it's interesting. What do you think?
When I think about the word honor, and to your point, you know, as far as at nighttime being able to lay your head on the pillow and say, you know what, I tried to live an honorable life today. Well, when I think about that word, I think that that word can't be expressed or participated with on your own. You know, you and yourself in a bubble, there has to be a relationship. You know, whenever you think about that, so many people know that verse, honor your father and your mother, and it will go well with you. You'll have quality and you'll have quantity of days. Those are the blessings that are associated with that commandment. And so it requires relationship. So I think it really comes down to, for me, in the most simplest terms, is when you see somebody that needs help, help them.
Mm-hmm.
And so not passing by,
Yep.
doing
Because
that.
like if you saw something on the corner,
Yeah.
some man beating up a woman on the corner,
Right.
most would drive by, but the one that would stop, we would say, well, that's an honorable act, right?
Right.
Which means that they think it's rare.
Mm-hmm.
Also, honor does seem to be a rare.
Yeah.
I don't know if it used to be though.
Yeah.
I think in our day and age, when you meet an honorable man that's a young man,
Mm-hmm.
you would go, oh, that's a cut above. There's not a lot of this type of honor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, because honor goes so against the culture, which says my life is about me, which encourages this inward looking, right? And to your point, you know, honor is about looking outside of yourself and being responsible for those relationships, right? Having courage in hard times.
Yeah.
Usually they say honor has to have a focus too. So in medieval days, the focus might be for king and country. So they go on, I'm working for this place or these people. And that might be an issue why it's harder for younger men right now, because it might have been, you know, their faith in God. It might have been their country. And those things are up for grabs right now in a lot of ways, just because of the political climate. So people may not go, look, I'm not gonna lay it all out there for country anymore. I'm not gonna lay it out there for, you know, my Lutheran denomination anymore, or whatever it is. That might hit at the loyalty. I don't know if people know what to be loyal to anymore. So
I agree.
we say if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time, and that could be why young men find it hard to be honorable. They don't know what's the point.
Yeah. Well, I think that there is less confidence than ever in institutions. And so, you know, I kind of, to your point about like when you mentioned like the Lutheran and you could have picked any, but 40, 50 years ago, if a family moved across the country, if they were Baptist, they're going to find a Baptist. If they're Presbyterian, they're going to move into a community and go find the Presbyterian church, and they've joined it before they've even met anybody.
They're
Practically,
Hell's Angels. They're going to find Hell's Angels.
exactly, because that's loyalty. They're loyal to the institution, but that's pretty rare now. I mean, it's like, no, it's going to be my preference, what fits my needs, you know. And it's a double-edged sword. Some of that's good, but some of it's not so good. I think that we have become, and this is probably consumerism that's done a lot of this, but we've become kind of narcissistic as a whole. You know, even if we're not individually narcissistic, we have narcissistic tendencies because it's all about me. It's all about my thing. And that kills loyalty.
Yeah. If you think about what the Bible says in Philippians, right? To do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in everything consider others more important than yourselves. It says, you know, we should have the mind of Christ. And what is that mind? And so it goes back to your point which is, you have to have a code. And where do you get the code? You don't get the code from within yourself. You get the code from an outside source. So if you're in the Marine, that code is given to you, right? If you're
They don't go, hey, okay, first day of boot camp, everybody write your own code.
exactly,
Exactly.
exactly. So it's something outside of you.
Yeah.
And so you have to find, what am I going to be loyal to outside of me? What code am I going to accept in my life? And, unfortunately, a lot of people are accepting a code that's really fluid.
Yeah.
It changes every day
Yeah.
with whoever's in power or whoever their friendships are.
Right.
I was studying some of the early chivalrous codes, and the one that stuck out was that they all said that they would take the side of the widow or the orphan or the weak or the women.
Yes.
And it wasn't because these men might not want to do things with women, but the king had said, in this kingdom, this is how we're going to treat the women. And you think about even young men today, even sexually, issues of pornography, whatever it is, it's hard to explain to a young man why that's going to be harmful to you, because it's there, it's easy, doesn't appear to cost anything. But when you talk to young men about what that industry is doing to hundreds of thousands of women around the world, and to their own ability to even relate with, have a real relationship, then all of a sudden pornography, or the struggle of pornography, makes sense. Because when you go, you're sort of gratifying yourself at the expense of those that are weaker than you. Then maybe that's a different way to look at it. Where before it's just a sexual thing. I'm struggling, but there's honorable ways to struggle through lust, and there's dishonorable ways. And so when you expose it like that, then maybe young men will go, I don't want to hurt anybody with my issues. And that can become a code. You can actually look at a lot of things and go, I'm not going to use money to hurt people. I'm not going to use women to hurt people.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to hurt women for my own desires. And I think you can live honorably without a belief in God. I actually do, but I think there are certain things that honor would require, that I think if you don't believe that there's an outside author of a better way to live, I think it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then your code it's going to change with your emotional or circumstantial situation.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't have an outside.
I think it's part of the problem today.
Yeah.
You're flexible, which is really no code at all.
It is no code at all.
It's no code.
It's the code of convenience, right? So whatever's convenient is my latest code.
Yeah.
Whatever works for me.
Have you guys ever made a decision that you remember that was a really hard decision, and honor was the only reason why you picked the right?
Yeah. In fact, we were talking last night.
We were talking last night about several of those.
About several of them. We were talking,
telling several stories,
sitting around the fire last night talking about it. I was very young and had just left, had just graduated Bible college, just got married, and went out to West Texas on staff at a church. And my first experience, for about 3 or 4 years, I'd been on staff at a church and just had the greatest experience ever. Just a wonderful pastor that just discipled me, and he was just amazing and just open-handed and let me get away with way too much, really,
right.
But it was just open-handed that way. And then I go out to a better job, bigger church, more money, all this. And it was terrible. I mean, this guy, it was bad. I questioned whether the guy even knew the Lord. I mean, that's how bad it was. And so, the guy got physical with me one time. I mean, threw me against a wall. And like I didn't take this. They didn't teach me this class in Bible college. But anyway, it was that bad. It was this bad of a deal. And so 6 months I left, and it, I didn't leave like, love you, brother. Yeah, it was not like that. It was like, see ya. So I held that for a few years, and then when I got ready to go to St. Louis, and we were in this, I know that's coming over the microphones.
Still don't hear that in the neighborhood very often.
Well,
Driveway.
we can pick back to after that and just cut again.
Yeah. So we go to St. Louis to start a church, and I mean, we're in the midst of making all these plans, and the Lord, I know the Lord spoke to me and said, you need to deal with that. You need to go back, and because you left dishonorably. Was I right? I was right, but I was carrying it out wrongly.
Yeah, that's good.
And so the Lord, I mean, I called him up and asked him to forgive me for my attitude. I was hoping he was going to go, oh, and I was wrong too. Forget. He didn't do that. He goes, oh, I forgave you a long time ago. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
but but there was something came off of me then.
Yeah.
Something left my chest because I had been acted dishonorably. And I was right about the situation, but I was wrong and dishonorable in the way I was carrying it. That can sneak up on you.
Yeah, that's good.
I can think of, I don't know. Let's see, I was in my early 20s, and through some circumstances, it became time to leave one of the church communities that we were a part of. And I remember my dad telling me, hey, you just can't leave. You need to go communicate, with the leaders there and let them know. And so I did that. And I remember doing that. And I remember just being that young, it wasn't, it was kind of intimidating to me. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. And, but I remember that track record of then doing that throughout my life when those kind of situations would come up, and just being willing to show up and communicate. And I really saw a lot of fruit out of that in those relationships, how they would continue, in different ways. And the dynamics maybe changed of how we interacted, all I mean by that is like the rhythms and this sort of thing,
Right.
But there was still genuine affection for one another.
Sure.
And just looked differently. But honor, I can also remember of some situations too. Honor doesn't always necessarily mean, sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean it's not always this lovey-dovey, kind of perspective. Sometimes the honorable thing to do is what you talked about earlier when you equated it to the physical situation. If you're driving by and you're seeing somebody that's beating on somebody else and interfering, sometimes it's interfering, and it means to go communicate to somebody and have to say some hard things to them.
Yeah.
That, hey, you've got some blind spots or something, and it's the honorable thing to do because you're doing that because you care for them,
Yeah.
and those situations are not always
not pleasant.
not pleasant.
Yeah.
It's the honorable thing to do.
100%.
Think of any time that you back was against the wall and you went, oh, I think I'm going to take the high road here.
Yeah, I think of a couple of things. I could kind of piggyback y'all's thing, and I think I won't. I'll go to my secular life, and say, I had a business for 30 years, and it was a great business. Took some clients skiing in Colorado, and I was on a lift with the president of this company that was a client of mine, and he made an offer to do some deals that were underhanded. They just weren't ethical. They weren't right. And so I'm on that list, and I think, well, one thing, I think he's put me in a really bad situation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he's kind of giving me a yes or no choice, you know. He didn't sneak up on me with it, you know.
Right.
And I'm like, man, you know, if I say, and so there was a wrestle there, you know.
Yeah.
He was a major client of mine at that time, probably, you know, I mean, probably percentage wise, the biggest client I had. And I thought, man, if I say what I'm going to say, I'm probably going to lose him as a client. And so it was a wrestle. It was really a wrestle. Wasn't an easy thing to do, but I said, I can't participate in that. I have no desire to do that. I did lose him as a client.
Did you?
Yeah, I did lose him as a client, you know, because it's kind of a kickback situation where, you know, I was giving bids to him, and he would get some fake bids, and then he would give me the job and kick money back to him. And I was just like, man, no way. I can't do that. I can't live with that, you know. But I will say, you know, sometimes being honorable doesn't pay off in this world.
No, that's good.
You know,
But that's the
doesn't.
cross. Sometimes you have to pick up the cross with that.
You do.
Right?
You do. Right. So sometimes being honorable, you know, we want to think, if I'm honorable,
It's
you know,
all going to work
right,
out.
it's all going to work out. And it took me a while to replace that client, you know, and it hurt my business, but, you know, at least I could sleep at night. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the wins you get though, because you have your life is a story, right?
yes.
And what you pass on to your friends and your kids is your story, and you get big dividends. You know, you lose a client, but you win the respect of a son-in-law or a son, and I just go.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is you have no idea if 5 years down the road, the client or the handful of clients you did get was all from the seed of honor that you sowed. And the Lord was like, you stewarded this well. I'm going to reward you.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
I don't know. If I could tell you one more story, and it has to do with the business. So, when I say these things, I want y'all to understand, I have not always acted honorably. I'm not a man that's sitting here saying, man, every situation I've ever had, I've acted honorably. But man, there is a reward behind acting honorably, right?
Sure.
And so it's often a help that you have that tangible difference, right? I acted dishonorably here, and man, that was painful. That was hurtful.
Right.
In the moment, it seemed like the best thing to do, you know, but in the long run, it doesn't pay off. But on the short term, it seems to. And then the dishonorable or the honorable thing sometimes doesn't pay off in the short term, but it does pay off in the long term. So I went bankrupt. When I started my business, I had it a few years. I went bankrupt, and it was hard. It was really, really hard. And I had had some friendships with some of my suppliers, and really cared about them a lot, cared about their business. And when I went bankrupt, of course, you know, they couldn't touch me. I owed them money, and they couldn't touch me. And I said, I had just made up my mind. I said, and I even told one guy, a guy named Lamar Jordan, who was a big deal at that time in the industry I was in. I said, one of these days I'm going to pay you back. And he kind of blew me off. But 5 years after I went bankrupt, I walked into his office and handed him a check for what he couldn't collect before. And then believe it or not, about 10 years later, one of his salespeople called me. They said, hey, we can't sell this product direct to the end user. We have to go through a company. And ma'am, I just want to know if we can put your name down as the company it's going through. And I said, yeah, why do you want to do that for me? Because it was going to be a pretty significant bit of money that I was going to get, a significant profit, because I didn't even have to touch the product. And this girl says, well, everybody here knows what you did for Jordan.
Wow.
Yeah, for Lamar. He was dead at that time.
Wow.
And I never expected that. But that is you know, that's where it paid. You know,
Yep.
the one it didn't pay off, the other it did.
Yep.
So yeah,
That's a great,
I love that.
great story.
Feels like a good ender right there.
Yeah. End on a high note.
Pay me now or pay me
Uh,
later. That's all.
that's it.
Yeah.